Hello my friends, HM here. Now in this video I'm going to update you with the latest that is happening in Ukraine's incursion here in Kursk. I have some exciting new things to tell about some new weapons that Ukraine are using there very effectively that they couldn't use effectively elsewhere, but they can do it here. And also I have a story about how United States, just by allowing a new weapon to enter the Ukraine war, can completely change the war situation in Ukraine's favor so that Russia will have far less success with their glider bombs that are killing a lot of Ukrainians at the front lines and that allow Russia to move slowly but steadily forward in the Donbas region. That can end with a single weapon that United States can approve, and that weapon is affordable and it's also plentiful. We have lots of these weapons. So if you think that sounds interesting, keep watching. Okay, but let's take a look at the war map situation here. So here we have Europe and we have Ukraine and Russia. And let's move in. And here we have the Russian occupied parts of Ukraine. And all the action here with the Ukraine incursion into Russia is happening up here. And the most important thing that has happened, let me position the map here, is happening right here. Ukraine has taken out the third and final bridge over this river that is running. You can see it. Here we have the border between Russia and Ukraine. And up here we have a river that runs through here. And if we zoom in a little bit, here we can see the river. Here's Ukraine, here's Russia. Here's this river going here. And they took out a bridge that goes over here. If I zoom in, you can see here's a bridge. That one is taken out. And yesterday they took out another bridge. If we follow this river again, they took out another bridge right here. The day before that, they took out this one, this bridge down here, and that was the third bridge. That was the first bridge they took out. And that was the largest bridge that was hardest to destroy, but they took that out first. And it could also carry tanks in and out. So now the Russians, all the Russians that are stationed here, they're surrounded by Ukraine here and Ukrainian troops that have taken part of Russia here and then this river. So they're completely surrounded and they cannot get their heavy weapons in and out. That's pretty good. What else is happening with this incursion? Can we see any changes in how the war map has moved? Now this is the 17th of August. Let me move it forward. This is the 18th. And we go one day back. Actually, nothing has changed according to this war map. But I know for a fact that a few things has changed, but we can only see it in another map. So I'll jump over to that map. This is from the 18th. Take note of this area down here. If I go one day back, they didn't have it. So one day forward, they are moving forward in this area. And if we go back to this map up here, the city they took is this down here. This village has been taken now by Ukraine as well, but it's not reflected in this map. In this map it just says that they are fighting in this area. And another thing I know is happening is that this little city down here, Osersky, I believe it has been taken now also by Ukraine, or they're fighting over it. And then also this Giri, they're fighting over it, or Ukraine has actually taken it. But we might see that tomorrow in an update from this map here. What else? I can tell you that Ukraine are also using glider bomb, and they have two types of glider bomb. And I can show you the first one here. This is called the GBU-39 glider bomb. But it's a very small glider bomb. It only has 19 kilos of explosives, and the total warhead is actually 91 kilo, but only 19 kilo of that is actually explosives. The rest is just steel. So it's not doing a lot of harm. I have a picture of how much harm it does. It's being used in Kursk in a city called Vetpane. I'm going to mute it because there's copyrighted music here. Let me blow it up. Here you can see there's a little house. Here it is. That's how much of an explosion it can do. It will destroy a small house. But that's about it from this. So it doesn't give a good bang, but they're using this weapon because they have lots of them. I believe there are over 17,000 of these weapons and they're still making them. So NATO is making a lot of these weapons. And there's another variant of this weapon that has been made available for the HIMARS system, where they basically take this same glider bomb and then they have stuck a rocket motor on it, and then it can be fired from these HIMARS launch systems. In that case, we'll have a range of 150 kilometers. The problem with that rocket, it was built very recently, and after the Ukraine-Russian war started, then we were trying to get creative here in NATO to see how we could help Ukraine with some weapons. And we built this weapon with this glider bomb because there were lots of these glider bombs, also lots of these rocket motors, and Ukraine had this HIMARS system they could launch it from. Now that weapon is in production now, but Ukraine stopped using them because they didn't work in the Donbas region because, let me go back to deep state map here. The Donbas region, this is Ukraine, this is occupied areas of Ukraine. Now in this Donbas region down here, Russia has set up very effective electronic warfare systems that jams GPS signals, and that rocket there just doesn't work here. It doesn't hit what it's supposed to hit because of this electronic jamming. So Ukraine simply stopped using it even though they could get plenty of these weapons. But here, up in Russia, let me jump back to this map. Russia hasn't set up any electronic defense systems, so here they can use this weapon now again, and they have plenty of these bombs that are precision bombs and that they can use here. And they can also use a much more powerful weapon. They have powerful glider bombs, and I can show you one of those right here. That's the JDAM, and that was also used in Kursk. Here we can see big buildings, 2 huge explosions. Run that again with a bigger image here so you can see it. Big buildings that Russians are using for targeting fire at Ukraine. These bombs are probably 500 kilo, so much bigger than the other smaller HIMARS launched or airplane launched glider bomb that Ukraine have. I can show you where this attack happened because that's also very interesting. It happened over here. I know it happened for a fact here. It's not this thing here. This attack here has been done by the first of these missiles that I talked about. This one that could also be fired from a HIMARS. But this other video you saw was 2 building in this city here. And where is that? That's a border city to Ukraine in this area that has been now completely surrounded by Ukraine, and also that river that Russia cannot cross. So maybe I think that Ukraine might attempt to attack over the border here. I don't know, maybe they won't, because there is a defense line here and, you know, there are fighting positions, so it'd be easier for Ukraine simply to go this way through here, because there are no defense lines here, there are no minefields that they have to go through. So what I think will happen in the next couple of days is that Ukraine will, maybe 2 weeks, it could take 2 weeks, Ukraine will simply move in from this side and take this area here, and then of course create a defense line along that river, which is a natural defense line. I want to say something about defense lines. It basically takes 4 elements to create a really good defense line. It takes a natural obstacle or some terrain features such as a river, as we have here, or it could be some hills or high ground that you could also build a defense line around, because you want to have the high ground so you can look down over the enemy and direct fire over them. You don't want to sit in a valley, because then you can't really see what happens over the other side of the hill. You want to sit on all the hilltops. That's the number 1 thing. You exploit the terrain. The other thing is, of course, to build trench systems, and they can be anything from just digging a dirt trench to actually building a concrete reinforced trench with a roof, and also with fighting positions along that trench where you can look out, but you can also shut the door so drones can't fly into a window and then blow up inside your trench. And you can shoot out from these concrete reinforced trench lines. That's the best thing, but of course it's also expensive to build that. And there's not much that can penetrate them apart from massive glider bombs, and I'll come back to that later in my video. So you have terrain, you have trench systems. The third thing you build is electronic warfare systems with electronic jammers all along this defense line that can jam the radio communication so that drones can't fly into you, and so that these, for instance, these glider bombs have a harder time hitting their targets, because they also use satellite signals that you can then jam so they won't hit their targets. And that was what I was talking about. Here, let's zoom out Along this border here, where the war has been going on for 2 years now, Russia have had time, and also Ukraine have had time to set up strong electronic warfare systems where you basically have jammers. Every few kilometers you have jammers that are powered by electricity that has been laid out to power these jammers, and also the jammers are moved around every few hours, so they can't be targeted by artillery, because they will, and you don't lose so many of them, so you don't have to put up new jammers. But Russia up here, let me move the map up. Up here along this border here, Russia don't have any electronic warfare systems. They only have some trenches built at the terrain. That's what they have. They don't have minefields. They don't have electronic warfare systems. And the trench systems they have are not that robust. They're not very strongly built. Mostly it's just a dirt trench built by an excavator, and that's it. So that means that Ukraine can now use all their weapons, pretty much everything. Their drones, they can use them at the fullest extent. And they can also use these glider bombs and HIMARS rockets that they couldn't use down in Donbass. So that's pretty good, and Ukraine is of course exploiting that. Now, I said there were 4 things that made a really strong defense system, and we had terrain, we had electronic warfare systems, and we had trench systems, and the 4th thing is minefields. You also need to have minefields laid out with anti-tank mines and also personal mines. And if you have all 4 things, well, then you have a really hard to penetrate defense line, and that's why not much is happening down there in the Donbass. Very little is happening. But one thing is happening, and that's the last part of my video that I want to talk about. Russia has these very powerful glider bombs. We just saw Ukraine use 2 of them on Russia. But Russia has a lot of these glider bombs, and they're very powerful. And they hit Ukrainian heavily fortified trench lines, and they blow them completely up because they're so powerful, these explosions. And then Russia can actually move forward because they kill everybody and blow the defense line up. And then they only have the next defense line that will stop them again, plus the minefields. And also Ukraine's electronic warfare systems. If Ukraine had better electronic warfare systems, then they could actually make the precision of these glider bombs that Russia are using far less accurate, and then they wouldn't be as effective. But they don't have enough electronic warfare systems, Ukraine. Russia actually has an advantage there. They had much more to begin with when the war started. Ukraine is only now building up their electronic warfare capabilities. And it's very important that Ukraine keep doing that, and that they get all the help they can from NATO countries building up that electronic warfare. I even think that NATO has underinvested in electronic warfare. It's just so important. And with all these drone weapons that are all using GPS signals and also radio communication to a controller, it's so important that we have electronic warfare system. But I told you about one weapon that we have plentiful and cheaply in the beginning of my video that I teased a little bit about. What is that weapon that could change the balance of power here in this war to Ukraine's advantage? I'll show you that weapon right here. It is this discussion that the Biden administration have told Ukraine they can't use ATACMS missiles in Russia, although Ukraine would very much like to use these ATACMS missiles on Russian air bases because they have the ATACMS right now, and these ATACMS have cluster munition, and they can put this cluster munition explosions, which is basically smaller bombs that go out of the warhead of this ATACMS missile, and then they cover a large area and everything explodes, and it's perfect for destroying Russian airplanes on their air bases inside Russia. And these airplanes are used to carry these glider bombs that are inflicting heavy losses on Ukrainian front lines. So that weapon Ukraine would of course love to use on Russian air bases, but they can't because they're not allowed to do that from United States. And United States say that they should use them in Crimea and the Donbass instead. But there are no Russian air bases there. They have moved all the stuff to Russia because they know they're not targeted in Russia. Now, that policy has to change, but I'd also argue that the ATACMS is not the right missile to use for this. There's another missile system that's much better than ATACMS and that we should give Ukraine. And Biden has said they're open to sending long-range cruise missiles to Ukraine. And the missile I'm talking about is this one here. It's called AGM-158 JASSM. It is this one. This missile here is the right missile to target Russian air bases inside Russia. It's a cruise missile. That means it flies low over the ground, like 20 meters, so it flies below the radar. And even Russian radar airplanes that can look down and therefore in principle could see them cannot see this missile because it's a stealth cruise missile, so it's radar invisible. So it can basically come in like a ninja on Russian air bases and then spread out. It also has a very large warhead, like 450 kilo. That's the same as the ATACMS. In fact, I think it's bigger than the ATACMS. So it can make a lot of destruction on Russian air bases. The reason that the ATACMS is not the ideal weapon for attacking Russian air bases is that the Russians can see when the ATACMS are fired and then they can follow them. They have a satellite system, Russia, that they developed under the Cold War, and the United States also have such a system that can detect infrared heat signatures. And the ATACMS is a ballistic missile system, and it has a powerful rocket engine that generates a lot of heat. That heat can be seen from satellites from outer space, and Russia can basically see when they're launched and when they're flying in. So they can warn the air bases that in a few minutes you will have ATACMS coming in and exploding on your airbase, so move the airplanes away quickly. And they can probably move most of the airplanes away because they're training for that. The reason that Russia hasn't destroyed all of Ukraine's airplanes at this time is that every time Russia is launching their cruise missiles and ballistic missiles against Ukrainian air bases, Ukraine simply fly all their planes away, and they are warned because NATO can see them using our AVAX planes. We can see whenever Russia launches anything. We just call the Ukrainians and get your airplanes out of that airfield immediately. And they do that every single time. And that's why they have very little success in hitting Ukrainian aircraft. And also why I don't think the F-16 will be hit. They need to get lucky, Russia, in order to hit any of the Ukrainian airplanes in the air bases. And also, how many missiles do NATO have of this? We have 7,000 so-called short-range missiles that has the same range as the ATACMS, about 350 kilometers. That's plenty to go deep into Russia. But there's an extended range version of this cruise missile that has 900 kilometers range. 900 kilometers is really long. It's so long that if Russia is forced to move their airplanes 900 kilometers away from Ukraine, because otherwise they'll get destroyed by this missile here, and they will get destroyed, then they have to get 900 kilometers away. That's longer than the range of these aircraft. They have to use fuel tankers now in order to make an attack on Ukraine. Plus, it will take forever. It will take a long time to fly 900 kilometers with an attack aircraft to drop some glider bombs. And Ukraine will be prepared and can warn their soldiers in the trenches to not to go out and to go to the safest bunkers because these airplanes are coming. Plus, Russia doesn't have a lot of fuel tankers. I think many of the Russian airplanes can't even refuel in air. So it will have an immediate effect on the war situation in Ukraine's favor if we give them this weapon. Also, it doesn't cost much. It costs less than $1 million, the short-range version, and the long-range version costs $1.6 million. Very affordable. The US Congress allowed a few months back $50 billion to be spent. So $1 billion just for this weapon could buy Ukraine 1,300 of the short-range version of this weapon and like 700 of the long-range weapon here. Each of these missiles, because they are stealth, Russia won't see it coming. It's just there and everything explodes. And you don't send it off to an airfield unless you have seen on a satellite image that there are airplanes there that are worth hitting. So they'll hit Russian airplane each and every single time. It will be a game changer for the war. It will immediately stop the amount of glider bombs that Russia can fire at Ukrainian trench lines and give Ukraine an enormous advantage and decrease the Ukrainian losses immediately. We really need to do that. And then, yes, they can use the ATACMS in Crimea and Donbass. It's fine for that. But this weapon up here, because it's stealth, that's the perfect weapon for attacking Russian air bases. There was also one in my comments section who had an argument that one of the reasons perhaps that US wouldn't allow ATACMS to hit Russia is that Russia has this military doctrine that if they're targeted with ballistic missiles that the ATACMS is, then they will strike back with nuclear weapons. Now, I told in my response to that comment that Russia has already declared both Donbass and Crimea part of Russian territory, and since Ukraine already hitting these territories that apparently, according to Russia, is Russian, with this ballistic missiles, the ATACMS missile, well, they haven't used nuclear weapons to strike back. because if they ever did that, they'll become a complete pariah in the world, and also India and China would stop immediately to do business with them. Plus, another thing that will happen, and it's probably the real reason, we have a policy not to assassinate each other's leaders. It's actually very easy to assassinate. For a secret service to assassinate the leader of another country is very easy. The reason they don't do it is that it's also easy for your opponent to assassinate your own president back. So we don't assassinate Putin because we don't want Putin to assassinate Biden and so forth. But if Putin uses a nuclear weapon, then this policy about not assassinating leaders will just, okay, that's not worth it. Let's get this man assassinated. He's a maniac. Let's assassinate him immediately, even if it means they try to assassinate us back. We need to take him out. Putin knows that, and that's why he's not using a nuclear weapon. He knows he'll get assassinated a few weeks later. And we just saw how Israel could easily assassinate a Hamas leader in the middle of Tehran, and I made a video about it. It wasn't that popular, but it shows how easy it is really to take out another person, and they could do the same thing in Russia with Putin. Anyway, I think my video is long enough. I wish you a great life in freedom and democracy, and I hope you will subscribe to my channel so you can see the next forthcoming videos that I'm going to make. So goodbye. Thank you very much.